sei lá, cara. Good morning, Renee. Hey, man, how are you?
Good. Willis, how you doing?
Good.
Good.
It's a beautiful day of it so far.
Yes, sir. I got my door cracked open and all my AC off. It's not cold or warm. I just have the door open.
Oh, yeah, it's nice. It's nice. I like this time of the year.
Yeah.
My favorite, along with spring. Hey, Lisa.
Hey, how you doing?
Doing okay. My dog is
Good
protecting us.
morning.
Morning,
I
Renee.
must-
How are you?
Morning, Renee.
How are you? I must tell you that I am in the process of getting my booster shot. So I'm going to be on mute, but I am listening on my earbuds to the
Oh,
training.
That's dedication.
Okay.
I'm impressed by that.
Thank you.
That's very
Okay.
good.
I'm gonna go off. I'm gonna be back on mute now.
Okay.
Okay.
A neighbor across the street garage doors open and Sugar's trying to tell him.
I thought I would be late, but we have no. Here's John. Good.
Good morning.
Morning.
Morning, John. How are you?
So far, so good. Good to see you all. How are you?
Good.
Renee is getting her booster shot, so she's on mute for the time being.
Wow, that's
And-
dedication.
That's what I said, exactly. Yeah, setting the bar high. Was Lynn the one who was in touch with Catherine with the link and everything, as far as you know?
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I saw their email exchange, so I know that she confirmed that it worked for her. So
Okay.
she should be here. Yeah. And she confirmed that it was okay to record it. So I saw somebody started that, which is great.
Yeah, they might have set it up to record automatically.
Oh, okay.
I mean, I don't know. I shouldn't say. Willis or Mark or Renee might have done that, but it wasn't me.
It was recording when I showed up. Gave me the little thing to make sure I knew before
Right,
I clicked in. That's cool.
right. Here she comes.
Morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. Good
Morning.
to see you again.
Yes, how is everyone?
Doing well.
Good.
Willis and I were marveling at the day.
Yeah. At
You're in
Thursday.
The weather, I think they mean.
I'm
Yeah,
in
that's-
Atlanta. I'm in
Oh,
Atlanta.
Atlanta, okay.
Mhm.
So I don't know
And
how it
it's-
is in Atlanta, but in Virginia, it's awesome.
It's been really pretty here. It's cloudy today. I don't know if it's supposed to rain. We've been getting a lot of rain, but I guess that's good because everything still looks good around here. So, but it's getting cooler. That's the main thing. Can be so hot.
So I think it's just Charles that we're expecting beyond everybody who's here.
Right.
And Renee is getting her booster shot as we speak, Catherine. So
Oh.
she'll unmute when she's able. But
Oh,
she's
okay. Good. Well, that's good to be getting a booster. I'm waiting for the approval for mine so I can get it.
Mhm.
Trying to make sure I keep doing my part here to stay well and help other people stay well.
That's right.
Right. Well, maybe while we wait, Lisa, we could catch Dr. Meeks up on. So since we met last, we've had a few meetings and then we broke into some subgroups. So this is the subgroup plus Charles, who should be here in a minute, plus Lynn Farland, who couldn't be here, but that this is the subgroup that will be working with you on the training piece. So we're grateful for your time with us.
Well, I'm glad to see you all moving along. It means a lot to me. The mandate that Bishop Michael put out when we started the Center for Racial Healing was that he wanted to do something in this church to move people beyond just doing training. But the funny thing about all that was that a whole bunch of people hadn't gotten up to training yet. And so we have been really engaged a good bit around the country with helping people design a day's training, and then really trying to make the point that the training needs to be catalytic in the whole process of everything else that's going to be going on in the diocese. But it was, it's just been amazing to me how many dioceses don't have any kind of training or any apparatus for this work to be ongoing. And I think that was the major thing that Bishop Michael was saying is people need to get a better understanding about the fact that the work is lifetime work and ongoing, and there's no getting done, and that there needs to be a plan that reflects that understanding. And so in that regard, I'm given all of that and the burden that placed on the shoulders of me and the center, it makes me so happy every time a diocese is stepping up to the plate and saying, oh yeah, we need to get this, we need to do this, So thank you all so much for whatever way the path has been, for staying on it and getting to this point.
Yeah, it's so, I guess it's so human, but it's still so lamentable that it kind of ebbs and flows. I've been doing a lot of looking back at our parish history. It was part of my sabbatical project, and we're putting up a timeline. And so I found this article from a local newspaper, "The Episcopal Church Takes on Racism." And it was about people from my parish as well as around the diocese, the kind of the original repairs of the breach folks. This was in 2007 or something. Were, going around to different churches. They had developed this whole curriculum. They were doing, and it's just like, what happened? Like, how does it, I mean, it's understandable. Like everybody gets busy with other things, but it's still also just tragic that we don't sustain that energy.
Well, part of the problem is a lack of sustainability. But the bigger problem is that the church expects people to do this work as volunteers and would never expect that you should have a volunteer priest, or that you should have, that you should have a volunteer parish administrator. So this work needs to be put into the same, at least, place of importance as having a rector and a parish administrator, which you would never expect to work for free. And I have said this over and over to bishops across this country. If you want this work done, you need to be willing to fund it. Because people, it's hard work. It takes a good bit of energy, and people need to feel that that somebody is supporting what is being done, number one. And number two, it's a trade-off. So if I was a volunteer chair of the Dismantling Racism Commission in this diocese, and I was working probably 50 hours a week, but I'm a retired professor. I had the time and the resources to allow me to do that without it being too crazy making. But if I'd had a full-time job, I could not have been chairing that commission. And had I been chairing that commission, it would not have gotten the kind of engaged, focused work that it got, that it deserved and needed. And so, it is true, Lisa, that people's energy wanes and ebbs and tides. But if there is a structure that's been put in place, then the whole thing doesn't go away just because 3 people got tired. And that's what's been happening, because it's always secondary or thirdary, and it's always supposed to be some volunteers, and some of the people who want to volunteer don't know how to do the work, and some of the people who could volunteer and do the work don't have time to do it or are called to do other things. So it seems to me that the narrative shift has to be that from the bishop's office in every diocese, there has to be some taking this on as a major thing the diocese is concerned about, and funding it to some level to give people a little bit of a honorarium or something for their time, because you're going to spend a good bit of time putting together a curriculum, and then you're going to go out and do it. And that's hard work, and people get paid a lot of money to do that. And so to expect people to do it for free it's just not even right. I mean, on any level. And then it's absolutely not the best way to be trying to go. So I'm pretty evangelistic about, we need to pay trainers, we need to create support to help with like organizing the day, getting people registered and all that stuff. And dioceses need to have what you have, which is a group of people working to do more than just training, to support the training in the first place. And then you start to begin to have a little bit of a systematic way in the diocese for this work to be done and to be continued. Now, there's still more than a handful of dioceses where this conversation didn't even make it up to the table yet in any kind of real way. I mean, it's sort of like, we wish it would happen, but it's sort of like magical thinking. Just because you sat in your room and wished, you expect to walk out the door and find it sitting on the table, and unfortunately, I haven't figured out how to make that work yet. And if I ever do, I'll let you know, but.
Excuse me 1 second.
Sure. So remind me again that your group, what you call yourselves, the Repairers of the Breach? Okay, right. Good. I like that. That's good. It leaves you a lot of space. You can do all of this work and move into some decent conversations about reparations and all of that, and it will still be quite consistent with how you have started out characterizing yourselves. So that's really good. I like that, because sometimes there isn't a really good group functioning to keep going with the work beyond just training. And so that is a problem. And you all are there with a structure that feels like, just from what you've described, that you have some capacity to move forward and keep on moving forward. since you've divided your work up and kind of not tried to put everything in one basket, because it gets to be a lot going forward, you know.
That's certainly our hope, is to build
Yeah.
on more as we go. Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. Well, you will, you know, and it becomes an organic process. I think that's, if people could be a little more patient with that, including me, because I often want, you know how you want to go dig up the little plant to see if it's got any sprouts, the seeds, and then, you know, you got to start over. Well, you know, we all kind of get into, let me dig up the seeds and see if they're sprouting yet. But basically, the real work is to get a clear direction, to start in that direction, and to have the courage and faith to let it unfold. And it's amazing how much will just come up in an organic kind of way. And then when this stuff comes up, to be prepared to pay attention to it, to respond to it. It makes such a difference than sitting in a room somewhere trying to imagine everything. You know, I mean, I totally believe in the organic process here with this work, because then when you get somewhere, you get somewhere with this thing that's already got some grounding. It's got roots already, because it's grounded in some of the other things that have happened. So it takes a whole lifetime. That's the other piece. It takes a whole lifetime.
So could you say a little bit more about what that looks like in other dioceses, like the support, the diocesan support? So as you were talking, I was thinking like, oh, well, we should probably be thinking about requesting funds in the budget for next year to pay trainers, or to pay, you know, whatever. And also, like, are there diocesan, you know, models for diocesan staff people responsible for this area as well? And we have Willis, of course, our great new boon as diversity officer, but that's just, you know, part-time. He's doing a lot of it for free, as it were. So I just am curious about how other dioceses have made that work.
Well, let me just tell you quickly a little bit about what we did here. When I took over the commission became chair of the commission for, was called Beloved Community Commission for Dismantling Racism, there was a person in the bishop's office that managed the logistics around all of the training. So people registered for the training through that person. She kept up with everybody who took it. People get certificates saying that they've taken the training, and she made sure that those got sent out to people. So she managed all of the kind of that part of the training, because that's a pretty good piece if you start really getting it going. And I don't know whether you're going to have some kind of mandate for a particular group of people to do it or not. In this diocese, if you trying to be ordained, if you are on a search committee, or if you're a vestry member, you have to do the training. So, and most of the time, those folks don't have to have any verification of that if it's just vestry or search committee, but with the ordination process, that was necessary to send out stuff. So the bishop's office provided that. The bishop's office here provides a chunk of money that goes for training, and it comes to the Center for Racial Healing now, but it pays the trainers, and we pay each trainer $450 per class. And so when I started doing this, we were paying trainers $200, and that was better than a lot of places, but that's still not enough. And neither is $450, but that's a little bit better. And a couple of the trainers actually give the money back. I don't care if they give it back or set it on fire. Our thing is, we need to give it to them. And if they want to make it a gift to the center of the diocese or whatever, that's their business, but we need to do what we need to do. So in the diocese here right now, there's about $25,000 a year in the diocesan budget that is earmarked for training. And eventually that'll have to change, but given COVID and the the ways in which that's affected parishes and the budgeting stuff, we're not going to get any additional money for a bit just because of some shortfalls, but that's been adequate. We do 25 trainings a year, and we pay 2 trainers each time for those. So and then whatever supplies that we need, which we have, it's changed online, of course, because you just email everything to people. But we used to, when we were in person, hand out a folder that had all the materials in it for the day, and all of our little propaganda that we wanted to give out to trainers. And so, I mean, to the participants. And so we had to buy supplies and that kind of thing. But the bishop's office has been incredibly supportive in terms of those pieces. And now, because we have the center, we manage all of it, because that makes sense. So my staff handles the registration and getting out the letters and all of that, but the bishop's office still contributes the money to the center's budget to pay for the trainers and supplies.
That's helpful.
So yes, you should definitely request a budget of some sort for paying trainers and whatever else. I mean, it's just, you know, the main thing and the most important thing to keep in the back of your mind is the diocese needs to pay for this work to be done. That's the first step of commitment. That's the first sign of commitment, that you're willing to invest some dollars in it, you know? And it's not like a huge amount of money, because people, you know, we give somebody $450 to do this training day, and people get paid $200 or $300 an hour to do this training. So we know good and well that what we're doing is just saying thank you and trying to acknowledge that this is a big gift you've given us, and here's a little token of our appreciation. It's basically all we're saying with that, but it's important to say that, I think.
Puts a value on how important the work is. All of it, yeah.
That's right. That's right. And that's a first place to start. And we all understand in a capitalist society that investing your resources is a way that you say this matters to you enough to do that. It's not just talk. It's not just, it all sounds good and don't we look great because look at what we're doing. Yeah, we do want to look great, but it's not just talk, because we put our money right up here with this conversation, you know? So I don't know. Go ahead. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say to you, I mean, take us through for Lisa, I emailed Charles a reminder, so I think we can just continue and hope that he joins us.
So did I. So he's getting two
You got it
reminders.
twice.
So he's got plenty of emails reminding him, right?
That's right. That's right. So I don't know what's most helpful to go forward, but Dr. Meeks, if you could just take us through kind of the steps we need to have in mind and that we can be going through with you in the weeks and months ahead to form, that would be great.
Okay, good. So I talked to Lynn about this when we were getting to this point today, that the typical, let me just tell you typically how I have proceeded with this. First of all, I don't have this like template laid out for this is how we do this. I mean, it's all, I know how to teach, but so much of this is not about what you can teach people. So much of it is about creating a few parameters, and then people find the ways that they can step into those spaces, given the umbrellas. So a lot of the training day is really about who you bring into the room yourself as a trainer, you know, and it's about a lot of stuff that I have come to the conclusion that you really can't teach. You know, that people come into the room, you can teach somebody facts, you can give somebody an outline, you can do speech courses and elocution. You can do a whole bunch of things, but you cannot teach people's hearts to be where they need to be in trying to do this day's work. So that to me is the dance part. So what I'm willing to do is be in this dance with you, where you are designing some structures for the day, where you have a plan, where everybody's working off a similar plan. But the part of bringing yourself, your own openness, your own heart, your own experiences, your own narrative into the room in a way that is helpful and helps to create the space for transformation. That's Holy Spirit work, and that's God's work. And the best way that I know to do that is to just keep all of us always interrogating who are we, who do we think we are, what do we think we're doing, what is the process we're in as we walk through this life. And then we try to share with other people that process in some kind of way, if that makes sense to you. I want it to be really clear that we don't have this, you go through these 20 steps and you get done, and then we know you're done and we know you're good to go. No, we go in fear and trembling. We take what we know, we bring what we know to the table, and then God does whatever God does with it. And sometimes you can figure that out, and sometimes you can't. It is really walking by faith. I mean, you don't walk in the room with a blank mind. You don't walk in the room without an outline. You don't want a lesson plan. You've got all of that, but then the Holy Spirit's got a lesson plan too. And the real good work happens when we are willing for those lesson plans to coalesce. So you thought you were going to spend 15 minutes on this conversation in the training day, and the conversation went down a different road that was far more fruitful than anything you could have ever imagined, but it took 20 more minutes than you thought it was going to take too. So now your job is to be flexible and get yourself back in gear and pick up and go on down the road that you need to go down. And if you need to reorganize something, you do it. If you need to skip something, you do it. I mean, that kind of flexibility is something that you can't teach people, that you have to just be in the moment, willing to make these kinds of choices and talk to the person you're working with. And even though this might sound like, oh, well, that's why are you talking about that? That kind of thing can trip up the whole day. If you walk in the room thinking, this is how it is going to be, and it's all laid out, and I'm going to go step by step, and here's my outline, you might be pretty disappointed at the end of the day. But if you have that notion that this is my outline, and then let me hold it gingerly and know that this is where I can come back to if I, as the day is going, this helps me, it's a guide. But so many things can come up that you didn't count on. Like a couple of my trainers said, we don't know what happened, but half the room was in tears half the day. And so they were constantly kind of having to take a minute and take a deep breath and kind of give people some space to recollect themselves and listen to stories a bit more. That particular session, they ended up listening to stories more than they generally would, because people brought so much into the room and so much emotion and so much that needed some space. And it's not that you let the thing go down the road and you don't ever get back to what you're trying to do. It's not that you turn it into a therapy session. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about having a little flexibility so that you end up taking 30 minutes for this 20-minute allotment or 15-minute allotment without feeling like you've ruined the day. Because some people are so rigid until if they have a schedule and they can't follow it, then they are out of sorts. And you can't be out of sorts yourself. You just have to stay there, stay in the room, in the space, and abide everything that's coming towards you. And the biggest thing for me, the biggest challenge for me has been some of the nonsense that people have to say about their understandings around race and how we got here. I've spent 85 to 90% of my time working in rooms where I'm the only person of color in the room. and with a co-leader who's white, because that's the other configuration that we had in this diocese. We've managed to have a person of color and a white person as teams, and we've been fortunate enough to have enough people to do that. Though the people of color have been fewer, so they've worked a little bit more than the white people, but the team has been diverse. And that's a good thing when it can happen. If it can't happen, it can't, but it is a good thing. But some of the things that people would say could be almost microaggressive, but you don't, but because you're the leader, you have to process it quickly and respond out of some space that doesn't diffuse the whole conversation in a way that shuts it all off and causes people to think maybe they better be careful what they say. People come into the room, white people come into most of these rooms already scared to death. I don't know what in the world they think can happen to them in 1 8-hour period. They think you're gonna have mass murder or something that day. I'm just stunned by the level of fear in these training days. I mean, how many times have I heard at the end of the day, I was so worried about this day and I thought I was going to be made to feel so bad, and now I'm leaving feeling inspired, and I'm, you know, things really just weren't what I expected, and that were really, well, we didn't call this a death camp, you know. It was called dismantling racism training, not come and see if you can take a lethal dose of something and survive it. You would have thought that. So just keep that in mind, that people are coming with that kind of, a lot of time. It doesn't mean that you do anything any different, except that you just stay conscious. I think that the most important thing that I hope for people to do in organizing these classes is that the trainers themselves will be people who have opened up themselves to deeper and better consciousness around race and the systems in this country, and how those systems are held intact, and how much complicity there is in the church with all of that, and be able to come into a room where some people don't think the church has done anything, and some people think we're making too much to do out of this, and some people think it's not nearly enough, and you got all that disparateness in this room, and you come into the room with a sense that throughout this day there can be things said and done that can create a new conversation that gets a little closer to what the truth is. You're not going to fix anything by the end of that day, because it's 1 8-hour day. And if this could have been fixed in an 8-hour day, I don't know that we'd be here talking about it in the first place. So you're not going to fix anything, but you're going to hopefully open up some new ways of seeing. People may not like the day. People may be not like you even at the end of the day. And if that's the case, that's just how it goes. One day I was, you know, most of the days I'm pretty good with all that. Some days my skin gets a little thinner and I don't want to be disliked that day. And so I had somebody was really got right close to being ugly in a training day. And I was trying to get some sympathy from Bishop Rob Wright. And I was telling him about it. And he said, well, how many times has this happened? You know, I've been doing this work then for 4 or 5 years. And I said, well, you know, just this one time. He said, oh my God, well then what are you talking about? Why are you talking about this? Because if it's only happened once, you know, that's probably not even enough times. And I'm thinking, what kind of sympathy is this? I came to you for sympathy and you're trying to tell me I'm supposed to be a big girl. I don't even want to hear it. But he was right. Care. Yeah, that's right. What kind of pastoral care is this? I'm looking for sympathy, brother. But he was right about that, you know. So it's not a popularity contest, sort of like parenting. It's not a popularity contest that we're in. Our egos will be there because we can't help it, but it does. The ego has to be held in check.
Dr. Meeks, I have a question. This is Renee. I'm now in my 15-minute waiting period. I just got my Moderna shot, but I'm in my car waiting until I leave. I had one question. How important is it for trainers to understand and incorporate in their training what they perceive the history of that diocese to be? The history of the Diocese of Southern Virginia is so fraught with complexities as it relates to race. Of course, the first Africans in America landed at Point Comfort in 1619 in this diocese. And so I'm just wondering how much or how aware or how attuned do we have to be to diocesan history as we develop our materials and do the work?
Well, I think you need to be quite conversant with that history, and that your training day should probably have a piece in it somewhere where you actually very intentionally talk about that history, because in some ways your history is a little bit different from many dioceses in terms of the fact that the Point Comfort piece and just all of that. So I think that it's critical, and to learn as much as you can yourselves, and to incorporate some pieces of that in whatever the training day looks like, and also to be really willing to make sure that people understand the complexity and the complicity of the diocese in this whole thing, because I think a lot of people still don't believe that this has anything to do with them. You know, that slavery and genocide against Native people, I didn't have anything to do with that. So, and I'm here just trying to be a good person, living my life and not bothering anybody. And I don't want to cause too much trouble in the world. So why do you want me to be too engaged in this? And so the training day has to speak to that question some. And looking at the history of your diocese is one way to speak to that, because the diocese has got some threads of its history that stand right up alongside the history of the country and need to be interrogated and need to be dealt with. So I think it's very important, Renee.
Thank you.
And is the Moderna booster now approved?
Yes, it is available.
Oh, okay, good.
I was very excited to get the call last night to come this morning for the half dose. So it is available.
Well, I have to look into that. I'm sure my son probably already knows about it, because he's my keeper when it comes to vaccinations. So
I think it just went through last evening, I think, or
last night. Yeah,
I think
good.
so.
Well, I need to start looking into that. So,
Yeah.
and it's, to get back to John, your question about like the trajectory. So I told Lynn that we probably have a window for maybe 1 or 2 meetings before the year is out, but we're so close to the end of the year that we could get started and map out a schedule, and then we would start with, and then into the new year we end up, finishing. And the major way that we have imagined training in this diocese and for this center has been to use either the Eucharist or the baptismal covenant as the umbrella under which the day is constructed. And we use the Eucharist, but since COVID, people have been using the baptismal covenant some because it just has been simpler to do than having to try to figure out how to do online Eucharist, even though our priests have been managing that. It's, the Diocese of Northern California just put together their training. And I think of all the people I've worked with, they've come up with one of the most innovative, creative days I've ever seen, actually. They did it in compartments so that they have a section for Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders, a section for Native people, a section for African Americans, and a Latinx section. And I don't remember exactly all of the particulars and all of that. But they're in a diocese where they have to talk about Native people and Asian Americans because that's the predominant groups in their area. And then African Americans, of course, and Latinx people. And it turned out to be just really innovative and creative and wonderful to cover the major groups that have been the victims of oppression here. And it's important for the training day not to forget that there've been multiple groups oppressed. Now you may focus more on African Americans because that may be more who you need to focus on, but in terms of African Americans and Native people, I know would be in Virginia. I don't know so much about Asian American population or Latinx population, but it doesn't matter in one way. If you focus on African Americans and Native people, you just make sure that you have many times in the day where you say many of these same truths are true for anybody who's oppressed in these other groups, so that we don't get into acting like one group is just so far above another in terms of the atrocities that happen to them. Yet, Mark, yeah, is your hand up?
Yeah, so that made me wonder, when I was in the Diocese of Indianapolis, we actually did this kind of stuff pretty consistently. So for years. And so it makes me want, as you're talking with sort of the diocese specific, which would make sense, especially on the first one, but I'm wondering, particularly with this group, if we need to think a little bit more long-term. For example, the first time that we offer this in this diocese is going to be whatever content we come up with. But do we need to be thinking in terms of, if we're going to, require this every year to do one day, then what are we going to need to do different? We're not going to want to offer the exact same content from year to year. So do we need to be thinking more strategically long-term about the progress that we want to make?
So the answer to that question there can be different answers, I think. It depends on what you're trying to do. We have one training day, one curriculum, and we do that 25 times a year, that one day. We don't have a second day yet to require or invite people to come to. We're getting ready to start working on developing a curriculum for a second day, because you're right, you don't want to invite people for a second day and then do the same thing you did the first day. That's really an insult, really, to folks to do that. So, but if your training is going to be a requirement for vestry, search committee members, people trying to be ordained, leaders in the church, in the diocese, every year you're getting new people. So you should be working with those new people with that one day training. So you don't have to be trying to think about, now, what are we going to offer to the folks that took it last year? Because they're not the target. The target is the new people. So you're getting new people in the room. So you don't have to have a new curriculum. But if you want to say that if your training is more than 2 years old or 3 years old or whatever you choose to say going forward, if your training is more than that many years old, you need to do the second day or refresher or whatever you call it, then that needs to be a different offering, because you don't want to invite people back for something like a required refresher and then just do what you did before. I mean, like I said, that's not a good idea.
Yeah, we want to progress.
Well, the way you progress is not that you have 5 different versions of your dismantling racism training. You progress because you built upon that training. And so other things sprouted out here from, it was a catalyst for other things. The idea for the original training was to get people in leadership to start understanding the necessity and value of doing this work in the first place. And so, they designed that, that 300-page document that's at the church office under anti-racism curriculum. They designed that to be a 2-day training that was supposed to really get folks going. Well, that hasn't worked actually. But the fact, because people thought that they just did that and then they were done with the whole thing and they didn't have to do anything else ever. But so you want to be careful not to make yourselves the basic dispensers of activities around this. You want to use your training to get people motivated to come up with their own stuff. That's how you make progress, is mobilizing parishes. The training needs to be a catalyst for helping to mobilize parishes, which means that parishes then you should start seeing more things in your diocese that parishes are coming up with because of what you're doing, rather than just you trying to come up with more things for people to do. Because people would love for you to become an event planner. So all you would be doing is coming up with new stuff. And people love that. They wait for the next pilgrimage, the next book study, the next whatever. But the goal is to get people to be coming up with their own next stuff. And you will be supportive of that. You will help that. And now understand, the original training day, a follow-up training day may be designed down the road somewhere, but it cannot be done with the original. You cannot try to be doing both of these. You have to just be clear what you're trying to do in each thing you're doing. If after you have gotten an original plan that really is working well, and you think, well, after a year or so, we want these people who've done the training to come back for a refresher, then you have this other thing that they can do. But in the meantime, you are just trying to see how many folks you can get to do the first day's training and see them come up with what they're going to do themselves as next steps from having done that day with you. Willis, you had your hand up.
Yes, one of the things that I was thinking as you were talking is, and I really appreciated how you segue into the different churches doing their own training. We have to help people understand that this is lifetime work. This is not one and done. You can't get what you need to get in even 5 or 10 or 15 classes. So one of the things that I've been asked to do by a number of churches, the bishop just changed my my position title to canon for diversity, and I'll be talking to the bishop about making this a full-time position. But right now I'm scheduled to go into 3 different churches, one to help them produce a curriculum for their own study and evolution and travel in this, in what does it mean to be an anti-racist church. And I'm going into another church to explain my role, even though we haven't clarified what this role is. But just the mere fact that we're getting ready to talk about it and explore it is really exciting. And so, one of the things that we need to figure out, and I think we're on the road to figuring it out, is how do this position relate to the repairs of the breach? How do we do our work together, and how do we push each other? And if I could ask you one more thing, if I could share the screen, this is from a book called Liturgies from Below. Have you heard?
Yeah, yes, I know that book.
Okay, so this was a great prayer I thought about opening a class with. Can you guys see it?
Yeah.
Okay, so
Mhm.
come if you're willing. Come if you're willing. Come into this place. Be prepared to find yourself sitting next to your worst enemy. Come into this place. Be prepared to find yourself offering prayer with someone whose values and way of life revolt you. Come into this place, but be prepared to find yourself.
Mm.
Be prepared to find yourself dark places, dark thoughts that you would prefer to remain unacknowledged. Be prepared to live in a world that can never match your memories of what it used to be or dreams of what it might be. Be prepared to know you are loved, but be prepared also for the outrageous news that every other human being is loved no more and no less, no matter what you or they do. Come if you will. Be prepared for an uncertainty that will not quickly be resolved, for a discomfort that will not easily be salved, for a hunger that will not willingly be satisfied. Come if you are willing. I really love
Wonderful.
this.
It's beautiful.
And so maybe this is something that might start training or worship, anyway.
I think absolutely, as you all work on don't make sure you hang on to that as you work on the design for the day, that's certainly, that's a very beautiful invocation, in invocative invitation,
Ah,
actually, I think
like
would
that.
be, one of the things that the Diocese of Northern California did was include an African-American spiritual in their day's work. And they put it through, I can't, and now I'm not remembering the spiritual. I have to go back and look at the notes and I can tell you what it was. But what they did was use lines from it in every part of the day, throughout the day. And like I said, we call this training Eucharist-centered dismantling racism training, but baptismal covenant centered is equally as important and powerful, because those two images and two things are really at the heart of who it is we say we are as people of faith. And so the whole idea of the day is that you want the day to be about spiritual formation. The training day around dismantling racism is really about gaining a deeper understanding about spiritual formation and the necessity for dismantling structures that imprison the individuals in the room as participants, and people outside of the room have got to go if we're going to become the spiritually mature people that God wants us to be. Racism mitigates against us being who God wants us to be, every single one of us. And so racial healing is about finding the pathway to get past those constrictions. And so this day is about spiritual formation. It's about the church looking at itself and becoming a little bit more conscious about a pathway to get where God wants it to go. It's a complete reframing of this. This is not a day about social justice. It is a day about spiritual formation and about the church becoming more well. Yes, Lisa.
I've got a couple of clarifying questions, but you're also just making me think of when we were developing this training in Western Massachusetts and how revolutionary it was because of what people had heard about you and what you were doing in Atlanta, that whole frame of spiritual formation and Eucharist centered. And it was just so impactful up there. Even though we didn't officially consult with you, you had a big impact on what came to be up there. I was hearing you say that churches, people, one of the fruits of our work would be that as people go through this training, then they start developing their own programs in the parish. I wasn't hearing that as their own training.
No, absolutely not. 'Cause they
So
don't know
how
to
does
do
that,
it.
like, it sounds like what Willis is being invited to do, if that's an anti-racism training in a parish, like, how does that work with what we're trying to do, like the official diocesan training that would be required? And
Well,
then the
if
other
somebody,
question, go ahead.
no, can you remember the other question? If
Yeah,
I
it's just,
answered that one
I can
first?
remember, it's connected, it has to do with format, but, so you can
Okay.
go ahead on the first one.
So if you're gonna have a diocesan training that you require people to do, then there can only be one and one group doing it. It can't be everybody doing whatever they think is a good idea and calling it that. We had a little bit of that kind of stuff that's gone on here. And I've just had, the bishop has said very clearly in support of what I said, is that the official training is done under the umbrella of the Center for Racial Healing. Anything else is somebody doing whatever they want to do in their parish, and they still have to do the official training no matter what they do. If there's going to be that kind of mandated training, you have to be really clear about that and not get into some wiffle waffle stuff about, well, this looks like this and that. No, there is this training day. And if you want to have completed the requirement in this diocese for having done the training, this is the day you will do. Now, if some church is trying to develop a training activity, it would be real important to first of all see what is it that they're trying to do, and what is it that they hope to be achieving, and what is their imagination about what it's all got to do with them, and to make it clear to them, whatever investment you make with them, that it's a totally separate issue from what the diocese is doing. And that's a little bit of a dance, because people, you want to be careful what messages you send to people, because people get to, if somebody from the diocese is helping us do this, then why isn't this equal to this? You don't want to get into all of that. And I don't know, who is trying to develop what in the parish. What is that even what they need to be trying to do? It could be that they need to start somewhere else. People have all these strange ideas about like the magicness of training. It's, and they don't even know what they're talking about. And nobody's being trained to do anything. So that may not even be, before I would help anybody develop anything, I would really have to try to determine where are they and what are they trying to achieve, and if that is even a direction that they ought to be trying to take up. Because if they want to have a curriculum but have not done the work, then that curriculum just becomes another stopgap from doing the work.
And I think that's why it's important to be invited into these different churches that want to do stuff. And so if we could help them see, one, where they are, who they are, and how they are, then we can help them to do the stuff that suits where they are, and really help them see that, we are the one-stop shop, but what we do is necessary. And then what they do would be supported either by us or supportive of what we're doing. I don't know if that makes sense, but
It
we
does to
need to be
me.
involved.
The other thing I would say, this isn't my second question, it's another thing. I have been in our parish, I've really tried to align what we're doing with the bigger picture of becoming beloved community. That it's like we're not reinventing something, for each church. It's like this is part of what the Episcopal Church is doing. And so, we fit into that. And that's been really clarifying, I would say, in the parish in terms of, it's very, that becoming beloved community where you are document, just really helpful in laying out, what different activities are helpful, and sacred ground is part of it. It's all there. It's like they don't have to, and maybe, I've seen this before. A lot of, especially substantial parishes think, they can do their own thing, and they don't necessarily feel like they have to be bound by what the Episcopal Church is doing, but I think they do. I think
Well, and
they-
I think that some interrogating them, if somebody contacts me saying they want to start a curriculum, like if I were working with you all and then this church got in touch with me, I would have to really interrogate them about, well, okay, what is it? What are you trying to do? What is your intention? What problem is it that you're trying to solve? That you need a curriculum? And what do you mean by that? And what do you expect that to do? And what is that? How is that related to the overall process that the church is engaged in terms of dealing with race? You know, if there are no conversations, if there's not very little going on, and somebody is wanting to develop a curriculum, what do they mean? What do they need a curriculum for? What kind of curriculum do they think, and what's going to be the purpose of it? Because you see, it's so easy to just come up with, we'll get engaged in this activity of developing something, and then that becomes the work we do, rather than, is that where you need to start? Where are your members? Do you know what people think? How much do you talk together about these issues? You know, so there's just a lot of questions to be asked before you sit down at a table with somebody trying to help them come up with, we're going to do this, this, and this, and this. You know, because once they have a curriculum, then they start thinking they've done it. They've come up with this and they've got this plan, and they don't need you to tell them anything. So you just be careful not to get painted into these corners of resistance, supporting resistance that looks like it's an effort to be progressive.
Hmm.
It's really tricky, you all, but I've done it a good long time now. And I've kind of know, you know, that racism is a very insidious energy system. And it has every kind of way that you can't even begin to imagine to maintain itself. You know, sort of like scam artists. You think you've seen every scam, and then somebody comes up with one that just totally blows your mind that anybody could sit up and think of that. That's racism. It's an insidious scam artist. And so we want to do research, we want to develop curriculums, we want to do this, we want to do that, we want to do the other, oftentimes because we don't want to do the work. And if we've done all those things, we must have done something, because we're tired after all, and we've been moving all the time. So what do you mean we're not on the right track? You're not on the right track because you didn't start with the right questions. You know, what does this, so Willis, one question that parish needs to answer is, what does that parish want to be? And what do they need to do to get to be that? And is it a curriculum that they need? I doubt it.
Mm-mm.
I doubt it seriously. I doubt that's the starting place. So
Yeah.
I would want to hear clearly, you know, who do you want to be? And what do you need to do to get to be that? And what does that have to do with being who Jesus called you to be? And I would also encourage them to think about themselves as trying to answer who Jesus wants them to be, instead of being too concerned about being an anti-racist church.
Right.
Because I think that that's another one of those, we can check off the boxes. This makes you an anti-racist church if you're doing this, 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 and this. The rubric is not anti-racist. The rubric is Jesus. And so then when you put yourself in the Jesus requires category, what do you need to do?
Yeah, I think that's really important. You know, whose church are we? Are we the
Mhm.
church of the empire, or are we the church
Mhm.
of Jesus Christ? And so I mean, just asking that question, just trying to answer that question will tell you a lot of times up front whose church you are,
Mhm.
you know.
And it's a question you need to answer before you start trying to develop a curriculum.
Yeah.
You know, how do you know a curriculum is what you need if you haven't really interrogated that question deeply? You know, how does this church function on a daily, weekly basis that that speaks to it being either the church of the empire or the church of trying to be the church that Jesus imagined. So, so I would just have a whole lot of questions before I sit at the table with people to start trying to come up with, let's teach this little bit of history. Let's do this and that and the other. You can play that game till Jesus comes back and
Yeah.
still not even begin to do the work.
Yeah.
Because you can hide out behind all that. And we are Episcopalians who are bright and have great capacity for analysis and structure. And we can play in that sandbox forever without any transformation. And so I think that we have got to always be challenging ourselves and others to what is the core issue and who is the ultimate entity that we have to measure what we're doing by. And it's not by Kendi's anti-racist structure.
Right.
I'm a little weary of that because I just think that we just found us one more way to have a bunch of boxes to check. And then once we get them checked, we're done.
Yeah.
And happily so, we did, give me the prescription. So the diocese needs to be saying with its training day, this is not a prescription. This is a little bit of medicine on the road to trying to find the remedy for what's wrong with us, which is racism. And this training day is a little bit of medicine. It's like like you got an illness and you're trying to find what will fix it. And so you take this, you try that, you try something else. That's exactly what this is, and we don't have a clear-cut answer to this question, except to say, if you wanted to come up with one clear-cut answer, it is this: turn yourself and your heart over completely to God without trying to negotiate.
Right.
But then what's the practical way to do that in the world becomes the question that we're trying to answer with training days and book studies and pilgrimages and films and conversations and all these things that we do. Those are our efforts to help all of us have the tools to turn ourselves over to Jesus, because it is not just I'm gonna wake up in the morning and I'm gonna turn myself over to Jesus. No, that's not exactly how it works. It's little bit by little bit, that lovely little song about the inchworm, inch by inch, it's inch by inch by inch. And some days you, excuse me, decide that you can't do any inches today.
Mm-hmm.
And then you just take a break and then you get back on the path. So Willis, I'm saying all this to be a real voice of caution, because you're coming out of the as a canon for diversity. So what you say has a different meaning than if you were just Willis Foster talking to people.
Yeah.
Number one. And number two, you're trying to work on this diocesan project. So and number three, what is it that they're trying to do? I mean, I think those are, you can just steer people in different directions. I have had so many people call me, they want to start a center like the Absalom Jones Center. And I just chuckle when they say that, because we didn't just wake up one day and say, we want to start a center. We worked 8 years as a commission that grew into a center. 8 years before, we could not have started a center.
And
because we had to go through that process.
And that's the thing that I think we are struggling with as a diocese, because this is a new position. And so this has been a position that has been created without a clear vision and a clear direction. So we are really, as we are going along, um, developing the requirements, developing the framework, and I see myself as a person that's preparing the foundation for this position. You know, I'm not going to be here in this position for 10 years or, that kind of length of time. I may not be here for 5 years because, you know, I'll be 73 on Halloween. So I retired before, 2 times before. So we're still trying to figure out uh, what this thing is and how it relates to the repairs of the breach and how it moves the diocese forward to becoming not only not to cease being the diocese of the empire, but becoming the diocese of Jesus Christ. And so we have to work together to do that. And hopefully we can pick your brain deep enough so that we can get to that place or
Well,
approach that place.
I just want to say that, you know, we have these diversity officer jobs popping up throughout around the church now, and all of those things sound really wonderful, but you have to always be interrogating stuff. And we love to create these buckets where we can dump a bunch of stuff and put a label up, and then we kind of can forget about it. So I just want to be the cautionary voice here that says clear interrogation, communication, and just trying to be on the same page with the repairers of the breach group, and what you're doing, Willis, will be very important, or else you get into a whole lot of snag energy where you at cross purposes, or somebody's feelings have been hurt because they don't understand how this relates to that. That kind of stuff can be avoided by just being in really good conversation and working together to really explore particularly initiatives. And in this particular case, right now with this church talking about developing a curriculum, personally, if they were asking me to do that, I would not be engaging in that conversation with them, given that you're working on a diocesan curriculum, because I know how much people love to do this kind of, let's hurry up and do it, and then we can put ourselves in this category. I had a church here to tell me when they needed to get training that their senior warden said, well, he had all this corporate training and he wasn't that good enough. And I said, no, it's not. And then, well, can't you just bring the training here for like 3 hours or something? And no, we can't do that. There was all these, let's negotiate how we're going to get ourselves trained. And I refused to go even to their campus to do the training, and said, these trainings are scheduled around the city. Your people need to sign up and go, because of this rich downtown church that wants to stay in its little bubble, doesn't want to have to go out here to the hinterlands and see how the rest of the world lives for a training day. Because I insisted that they do that, to almost a person, I have gotten feedback from folks how glad they are that they had to go outside of their little bubble. And I really didn't care whether they were glad or not. It didn't really matter to me. That's how they were going to get trained. And they had to, because they were in a rector's search. So they had to do this. But everything about them wanted to make it so that they could own it and claim it and have it on their terms. Okay. Part of waking up is to stop getting stuff on your terms. That's part of waking up to the consciousness that there are other people in the world and there are other terms in the world that you have to navigate. And when you're in this bubble, this particular church is like, it's downtown, it's got this history, it's very wealthy, they own like the whole block, that they sit on, you know, all these amazing things. Well, then good, because you need to get in your car and you need to drive to Southwest Atlanta to this little tiny church that's struggling for dismantling racism workshop. And just that activity was helpful to the folks in that environment. So don't let yourself get caught in that, because people will be really, really good at trying to create these alternatives to having to really wake up. That's what it boils down to.
Thank you so much.
Mark, are you trying to speak?
Well, I'm just curious because I think Lisa still have a second question, right? Lisa?
Yes, but I think this is vital. This
Okay.
kind of
I
framing is.
I want to make sure that didn't get, I want to
yeah.
make sure that didn't get lost. I just have a simple question for this group as I'm thinking about, do we have a timeline? I know we're going to meet with Dr. Meeks for a couple times this year. Do we have a timeline? Do we know when to offer this to the diocese? Because then that can help how we.
This is a
Get
6-month
there.
project as far as I'm concerned. It will
Okay.
take you approximately 6 months, because we'll meet once a month for an hour and a half together as a group as you're working on your curriculum, and there'll be assignments for you to get done, and we'll come back together with how you've done those assignments, whatever part you're working on. To go back to John's earlier question, my expectation is that we will work together 6 months. At the end of that time, you will have created a training day that you will offer as a practice. We will work together with doing that. And you'll either just, we'll figure out the logistics about that piece, but that you will practice before you go trying to offer it. So I'm thinking a good time frame for like public offering in your diocese would probably be late spring, early summer.
Late spring, early summer of 2022.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Oh.
Yeah, because we could
I was
probably
imagining
meet
the fall, but
the
that's-
fall of
that's great.
2022.
that's what I
think you
was
could-
imagining we might be ready for that. So
Well, I think you could be ready easily and without having to feel like you were huffing into the finish line by early summer.
mhm.
From January to June would be 6 months, and we're going to start actually next month, at least with a meeting and then some assignments. And we probably will not meet in December, just because December is an impossible month with Advent and Christmas coming, and we're wrapping up stuff at the center. So we'll meet, we could meet in November and map out a schedule and kind of a trajectory forward of, and then meet again in early January. And end up with, hit the ground really running in a hurry. So Lisa, what was your other question?
It's just about format, because you have been using the phrase "the day," the training day, and I know from talking to Barbara in Diocese of Pennsylvania that they've done it as kind of a module thing where there's different shorter trainings, like a series of 4 or something over the year. I just wondered what your thoughts were about that, if the day is kind of the proven way of doing it.
I don't know, it depends upon what you're trying to achieve. And it depends upon how much effort how much energy are you going to put into trying to get this done, and how many people are you trying to make this available to? So if you're doing a training, say a workshop that is on dismantling racism and racial healing, we do from 9 o'clock in the morning to 4 o'clock in the afternoon, typically. I mean, that's the schedule. That's not really very much time, but it's a good enough block of time to cover a lot of things. I don't think that if you divided that up into 2 different times to meet, that would be helpful. I think trying to get people to commit to, you come this morning to this, and then a month from now, you come back for the second half, or a week from now, I don't see that being effective. I think that to do a day with some clear effort to try to get people to come up with what they will do next is that has worked very well for us. And we are now finally, we have enough staff to go back to people and say, those things you said you were going to do to follow up, how many of them did you actually get done? You know, we're trying to get a little bit of data from people. We've trained a couple thousand people in the last, I don't know, 2 or 3 years. So we've been surveying them, trying to kind of hear back from them. Have they done any of the things they thought they could do? And if not, what were the circumstances that kept them from doing it, and vice versa. So, but I think the day needs to be clean, completed, and that the workshop needs to be a day. And now if you scatter it around, I mean, that's you have to think about, what are you trying to achieve?
Okay.
That, and how do you get the same people back to do? It's too many logistical things that make it harder to manage. It's not that you can't do it, but makes it harder to manage. And so trying to get all this started, why not make it as simple as you can in terms of implementation, and being able to keep up with who is in the class, who's done it. Because if you're gonna have it required of people, you do need to keep up with that. And it's just, you know, people are busy. You have to think about that too. So somebody commits to a day, they come and the day is over. You want them to commit to part of a day, and then they got to come back for something else another time, and then another time. I mean, you could do that, but I don't see that as being as efficient as just finishing. And then, you know, following up in a year with a refresher if you want to do that. But you can't, I don't think you can split it up and have it be as effective.
Thanks.
Yeah, John.
Dr. Meeks, I just wanted to take a quick second to summarize a couple things that I have heard, because there's been we've covered so much.
No kidding.
Yeah, I mean that in a good way. So one thing is, I've heard, or I've reflected on the fact that no matter what curriculum we put together for the training, it matters a lot what what climate is we're creating for when that training is launched and when it goes forward. So I just wanted for your information to say that one of our other subgroups is focusing on sort of like telling the story or sharing the stories in our diocese and in parishes about this work. And so in my mind, that group has part of their task is fostering the climate in which this training can be successful and can take root. So that's one thing. The other thing is, it sounds like part of our work with you over the next months will be developing the training itself and you know how we want to put it together, and that's all good. One of the other things where we started out in this conversation talking a good bit about how important it is that we have facilitators who are skilled and open and you know ready to redirect or to go in different places and so forth. So I guess the question that comes with that is, besides the work we're doing with you to develop the training, what do we need to be doing to go about thinking about how we select and develop and prepare the right group of facilitators?
Okay, so that's a very important question that you just asked, because I was under the impression that you all were going to be the facilitators.
Well, it may well be. I mean, I think,
I mean, that
yeah,
that
no,
is that's the impression that I am operating under, is that this group of people that go through this constructing of the curriculum will be the implementers of the facilitators of that curriculum. Is that not your understanding, or?
I can only speak for myself.
Mhm,
I figured we would go in that direction, and I can only speak for myself in that.
mhm.
But even still, I would want to know how I can best prepare myself if
Well,
I'm one of them, and so forth. And so how
right.
yeah, how should we best be thinking about
So
that?
so John, let me just say that it's a kind of a 2-track thing that we will engage in over these next 6 months, that we will be working on developing this day workshop, but there will be readings and films and conversations that we have together that are definitely designed to help the folks who are implementing this to do some exploring too. So there will be some assignments that I will give to you that will speak to some of that. So it's kind of a dual process of working on yourself, and then, okay, while you're looking at these films or looking at this particular piece of material to present as a part of the day, but also working on, well, what does it have to do with you, this piece of material, this film, this whole thing. So I see this as kind of like a 2-track thing, where you're doing inner work, and the curriculum is the outer expression of that, some of that inner work, if that helps to make sense for that.
It does, no, thank you. So the process of developing the program itself will be part of our training as facilitators in that sense.
That's
Yeah.
right.
Understand.
And really, for me, the most important, well, there are lots of important things, but the most important one is for the facilitators to have a clear commitment to the work as spiritual formation. I think if you don't have that commitment, then it's going to be difficult for you to bring the spirit, the energy into the room that needs to be brought. If you're still thinking that this is social justice work and this is ancillary to the journey, you could do it, but you could also, I mean, God's not going to probably send anybody to hell if they don't do this work. I don't think, and I'm not even that concerned about what God does, because it's just above my pay grade to have to worry about that. But the thing is, it is important for this to be seen not as something you can pick and choose. That if you want to be well in the kingdom and be who God put you on the earth to be, this is work you need to do. And how can we bring that message to people? By talking about the history of the diocese and the history of the country, and looking at films and talking about certain pieces of the systemic racism journey that we have all had to engage. How can that conversation help us to be more focused on trying to become well and be the people that God wants us to be? So that's the umbrella. And I'm more interested in people getting that clear than most things, because I think what we have had is a whole lot of folks in the church who think that diversity training is good enough. That to learn how to be politically correct, to learn how to be an anti-racist, all those little descriptions that we've got for what we need to do in order to get this right, don't begin to address what we need to be doing is trying to be well. And that means dismantling these structures that keep us separated from ourselves and each other. And what is that process? That's called spiritual formation. And if we can get people to start understanding that, they can stop gnashing their teeth at the priest who preaches about liberation, and they want to call it about politics when it's not about politics. It's about getting yourself out of prison, as Howard Thurman would say. All of this stuff is about getting ourselves out of prison and becoming who God imagined us to be, because God did not imagine us to be living the way we're living. We took the freedom that was given to us and created these structures to oppress people and denigrate people, marginalize people, and control the power in the universe and all of that stuff that we've done. And it's our job to talk about that and not let it be relegated to being political, because then as soon as we say that, you know, those of you who are priests know how many times somebody hasn't wanted to hear what you had to say because they wanted to name it politics. And part of the reason why they've done that is because they hadn't read the New Testament very carefully. You know, if they had, they'd understand if you're talking about liberation, you're talking about Jesus. But they don't get that because they never heard of that Jesus, the liberator, actually. I mean, I'm just being frank about it, y'all. I don't have to be the priest, so I can say all this stuff and nobody's gonna do anything but think it's either true or think I should be run out of town, but it doesn't really matter. Because see, when you refocus that lens, you get it out of voluntary. You know, you don't get to be a participant or not. You get to think about, do I want to be well? You know, it's not, do I want to come to this? Yeah.
Oh,
yeah,
I'm
Mark,
sorry.
go ahead.
I'm sorry. We get that half-second lag in between that. I appreciate that, because Steve offered a 6-Sunday series on Bishop Curry's book, Love is the Way.
Mhm.
And I'm finishing that on some last 2 chapters, and the last chapters are all about politics, except not really.
Mhm.
And of course,
Mhm.
Curry is saying a lot the way you are, but the ears are going to hear it the way they are going to hear it. And so I'm kind of approaching this final session with some trepidation, but that's
Mhm.
really helped here. And I haven't putting it together yet. So thank you. That's
So
helpful.
Mark, let me suggest to, let me suggest to you that you might want to use the conversation between Jesus and the man at the pool of Bethsaida about whether he could get in the pool when the angels were coming to trouble the waters. And Jesus's question to the man is, do you want to be well? You know, rather than doing what I would have done, which was been gnashing my teeth with him about how folks weren't being kind, help him get in the pool. Jesus says, do you want to be healed? So, you know, so I don't know what the last chapter is in that book you're talking about, but you could frame what people are going to want to call politics under the umbrella of these things are required if we want to be healed. So we have to decide. But most white folks who are comfortably sitting in their well-constructed bubbles don't think they have anything from which to be healed, don't think they have any wounds from which to be healed. So trying to get them, first of all, to understand racism as the wounder of everybody is part of the struggle, because you think, you know, Wendell Berry talks about that. I think is it the book called The Wound? I
The
think
hidden
is
wound. Yeah,
The
Yeah,
Hidden
the hidden
Wound.
wound.
Yeah, I think that one of the big pieces of work that white people have to do is to start understanding their woundedness that has come from this systemic racist system that has not only been put in place in this country, but tries to prevail in so many other parts of the world. So how you get people to begin to connect to the shared wounding is really important, because until they understand the wounding, they're not going to appreciate that they need to get well of anything. And it's so easy to just call it political and then go on down the road and forget about it because it's not my politics, so I don't have to deal with it. Well, what about if it's about your soul? You know, what about if it's about, is your soul completely well if you have to have categories of human beings? You know, do you have categories of human beings? And how come you have those categories, which speaks to the wounding? Do you really believe that everybody is God's beloved child? Do you? Because most folks don't. You know, we say all that, you know, everybody's creating God's image and God loves the little children, black, brown. We've been singing those songs. We don't believe a word of it. Because if we did, we wouldn't be acting the way we act. So, you know, so I think you can be disarming by going back to some of those root things that are kind of, they kind of catch people by surprise because they're expecting you to come in talking about how we ought to care about George Floyd. And instead you come in saying, you know, what do you really believe? At the core of yourself, do you really believe God loves everybody? Do you really believe everybody's created in God's image? And if so, what does that mean? And then if you really believe it, and it means that you should be living that way, then how do you justify compartmentalizing and marginalizing and denigrating some people to second and third and fourth class citizenship? How do you justify it? You see the difference between trying to get people to care about fourth class citizenship and getting them to try to see what's going on in their own heads about all this. Am I sitting up thinking it's really okay for those Mexicans at the border to be in cages because after all, they never should have come here in the first place? Or do I sit in my house thinking, those are my sisters and brothers, God made them. I don't understand their circumstances. I don't know why they have to be fleeing from their country, but I know God made them. And I don't believe God would want that for them because they're God's children. Never mind my politics. I just have this commitment to an understanding of God that makes it impossible for me to relegate these people to being unimportant. And I still might be conservative. I still might even want to vote for Trump, but my heart knows, and I really believe that these are God's children. And no matter what I think, we have to be careful how we treat God's children. It changes the energy, you know, because now you're going to argue with yourself. You either believe that there's one God who's created everybody, or you believe there's many gods who's created a whole bunch of different kinds of folks. And some of us are better than others because that our God was better. Is that who you are? How does that make you a follower of Jesus Christ? I just think that part of our problem is not that, it's not even the narratives of hate, it's the people so unclear about what's really in their own heads and hearts, you know, and not being able to understand that you can't, if you believe God is one God in the universe, then you don't get to act like there are these different species of human beings walking around that weren't created by that one God. Now, which one is it? And just, you know, let people have to struggle with some of those things that most of the time don't ever even get talked about. When was the last time somebody asked you, do you really believe there's one God? Because your behavior makes it look like you think we're the Greeks, you know, with the God of this and the God of that, and these gods are more important than that God and more powerful. Are we Greek or are we Christian? So Mark, I hope I helped you with your sermon. But I think
well, I am
these
preaching also, but that's the forum that I'm winding down. So either way it works. So thank you.
because I
Run the
think
old
that
1-2.
some of those basic some of these basic issues will be very important, you all, in the teaching of these classes. You know, these are some premises that you can have as the underlying premise here of this curriculum is that there is one God in the universe, and all human beings have been created by that energy force. Therefore, everybody deserves to be treated as a loving child of that creator. That's one of the basic premises. And so if you come into this room thinking they're first and second and third and fourth and fifth class citizens, then we're here to tell you we don't think so. And this is why we don't think so. And then you have to decide now by the end of the day or the end of the week or the end of your life, where you stand with all of this. You see, you can't make somebody be anywhere, but you want to say, if you're holding this position, that there are many different levels of importance, there's a hierarchy of value in human beings, you need to then see if your understanding of God helps you to explain this position. You believe that there's a hierarchy of human value. What is that grounded in? That there's one God in the universe who created everybody and loves everybody equally? Is that what it's grounded in? Because that doesn't make sense, right? You know, I just think we need to get a little slicker with creating these scenarios that people have to begin to interrogate themselves about. It's got nothing to do with whether you want to like me or not. It's got to do with whether you want to live as a split personality. And if you want to stay split and hold these kinds of positions that you really are indefensible inside your own head, then it is a choice, and you can make that choice and you can actually live that way. But is that then what you think God had in mind for you? You see how the reframing of all of that causes the most racist person sitting in the room to have to take a look at themselves. And no matter how much they don't want to be in the room, they're at least in the room. And so the fact that they're in the room, you can make the assumption that there's something in them that they're there because they're on the vestry and they have to be, because people have told me that. I'm only here because the bishop said I have to be. I said, well, you know, it wasn't really the bishop, it was really General Convention that passed a resolution that said that leaders needed to be go through these workshops. So it's not really the bishop's fault that you're here, but you are here now. And so let's see what we can make of that. So, and you know, what you have to do though, and I know this is we need to end here in a minute, but you have to make so much peace inside yourself with all this stuff that no matter what somebody stands up in front of you with, you can just listen to it. You can listen to it, and you can listen to the Spirit's response to it, and not have the response be just what might come out of your own mouth, because you just think, how can you be this stupid? And you can't be saying that. You can't say it literally, and you can't even be saying it in the background when you're trying to talk. You have to really try to find a real response that's grounded in some place that comes out of you. And I don't want to make this sound so mysterious that you think, I don't know what she's talking about, and I don't think I can do it. No, that's not what I mean. I mean, you just got to be at peace enough with yourself about it so that you know somebody's standing in front of you saying a bunch of stuff that just so doesn't make sense, like somebody talking to you about why they can't be vaccinated, and you want to just say, you fool. Have you ever seen anybody die on a ventilator, is what you want to say, when you just kind of got to look at them and try not to be totally uncompassionate. So but you do have to be at peace about it, so that, you know, I listen to people talk. I do talk radio. Sometimes people invite me where folks are asking questions. And, you know, I've had Black folks call me up and try to explain to me how mistaken I am to think that racism is an issue. Racism is not the issue. A Black person trying to tell me that is very difficult to listen to. Because I want to say to that person that, you know, could you please tell me where you're calling from? Because it cannot possibly be the earth. So it must be somewhere that I haven't heard of, because what you're describing, can't exist, you know. And that just happened about 3 months ago. I was on the radio show, and this Black guy called me up. He works in North Georgia. So I know good and well a Black man working in North Georgia has encountered racism. I don't know what he called it, but I know North Georgia. And so I just listened to him. I was just curious and just asked him some questions. And because I thought, you know, there's not enough time in this radio call for me to be trying to fix you. So let me just listen at how you got there. And it was basically this person who was really afraid. And if he had to start naming racism, he was going to have to name what was happening to him in North Georgia. And it was going to make it difficult for him to work in North Georgia, which is where he needed to go to work every day. So I
He needed to
understood.
attend. He needed to attend an internalized depression class.
He did, but in the meantime, he needed to find a way to keep his livelihood going without driving himself totally crazy. And so he chose denial. And I heard that, but there's nothing I can do about that in a 5-minute conversation. So don't try, just listen. But it was not easy my point is this, that it was not easy to listen to him without wanting to just jump up and down and say something that wasn't going to be helpful. Maybe listening. I don't know what was helpful or not. I just knew what was expeditious in that moment. And sometimes that's the best you can come up with, and trust. I mean, ultimately, all of this stuff is grounded in trusting. After you have done everything, what is that scripture that talks about praying and all the stuff? And then it says, and after you do all that, then you just got to stand. You just got to stand. You just got to be there, present. So this is I don't know, do you have any other questions before we wrap up? And then maybe if we could just choose the next time to meet,
date,
and
yep.
then and I can send you I'll send you some questions and stuff that I want you to work on. So what is the best, sort of send it to Lynn and have her to send it to everybody?
What do you think, John? Send it to us. Well, John and I, send it to us.
Okay, so Lisa, I'll just send it.
I mean, Lynn is fine too, but
I'll
just
send it to you,
to
Lisa,
lighten
and you
her
can
load a
send
little
it
bit.
out. So let's just find a time that we all can agree to meet, and then the folks who are not here can, it was just one person that's not here.
Yeah,
Two,
just Lynn.
Lynn
Charles.
and Charles.
Okay, so early November. I want to say. I wonder.
This time of day is usually good for me.
In the morning.
If we're talking about the time of day, yeah.
10 would be good, Renee.
For me, during the week.
Okay.
We have our regular repairs meeting on Thursday, the 11th in the morning.
Okay.
So
how about Thursday, the 18th in the morning?
That works for me. How about other people? Yes?
Probably 10 till 11:30. We should block off.
Okay, I won't be able to attend on the 18th.
Okay.
My hearing is not so good, so my wife's complaining about the loudness of the TV. So I'm seeing a ear guy on the
Okay,
18th.
so Willis, can people meet on the 15th from 10 till 11:30?
15th is okay for me.
Yep.
10 to 11:30.
Renee, is that good for you?
Yeah, sure.
I'm trying to look at my calendar. I think it is good for me. That's a Monday.
Yes.
Yeah, Mondays are pretty good for me. So
okay,
I'll put it down.
Okay, 10 till 11:30. And Lisa, will you and John take care of sending out the link and all that? Okay.
Yes.
And I'll send you the materials for reflection. Okay.
Super.
Well, I hope this morning has got you ready to jump into the deep end of the pool. And that's what it always feels like to me. And I used to always dread the beginning of school, because I taught for 30 something years, college and a lot of first years. And I always thought starting was just challenging, but it was always so lovely to see where we got to in the process. So I'm looking forward to seeing where we get to. And thank you all for being on the
Thank you.
journey.
Thank you so
And-
much for
Thank you.
being with
And
us.
thank you.
And I
Appreciate your
love that
expertise.
you are welcome, but I love that you were quoting from Liturgies from Below, Willis. Everybody needs to read that, with some beautiful prayers and reimagining of scripture in ways that really is enlivening. So it's a good resource.
Oh, it's a wonderful book. I have it electronically, and a friend of mine is sending me the hard copy for my birthday. So
Oh,
it's
okay.
great. It's great.
Yeah.
You will
And who's,
put the information, that writer and the title, in our materials, Willis.
I'll send it to you. I'll send it to the
Okay.
group.
yeah, well, that would
Thank
be
you.
good.
Yeah.
Well, all right, dear brothers and sisters. So I'm glad to be with you this morning and looking forward to seeing you in November. And I'll send you some things to some questions for reflection and some things to just think about a little that we'll talk about together. And I would just say now to start, really just kind of thinking about this work in terms of what is it that you think you bring to the table for it, for helping to do it. What are you bringing? What are your inner resources, experiential resources, your skills? Just kind of, be kind of honing in on some of that, and that would be helpful. So many blessings to you.
Thank you so
Take
much.
care.
for your time.
Thank you.
Bye.
This has been wonderful. Thank you.
Well, you're so welcome. And you feel okay, Renee, after your shot?
So far, so good. I'm at home now. And the next 24 hours will be the telling points, I think.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
Well, I hope you'll be fine.
Thank you.
So
Thank you.
Take care. All
Mhm.
right. Goodbye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.